Okay, and we are live.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Friday, September 17th, Special Districts Advisory Committee meeting. We do have a very robust agenda today, and we have a special guest, the Executive Director of CalAFCO with us. So pleased to have you all with us today. I'd like to start by calling the meeting to order and asking everyone if they would join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. And I believe Priscilla has a flag for us to view while we say the pledge. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. Can I ask the secretary to please call the roll?
Good morning.
Good morning.
So Kimberly Thorner,
Present.
Jack Beebe,
Present.
Paul Bushy,
Here.
Fred Cox, absent. James Gordon,
Present.
Tom Kennedy, absent. Cheryl Landrum, absent.
Red.
Al Lau,
Here.
Hector Martinez, absent. Marty Miller,
Here.
Mark Roback is absent. Joel Scalzitti, absent. Mike Sims,
Here.
Oliver Smith. Oliver Smith here. Absent. Bob-
I'm here. I just didn't
Oh, sorry.
hit the right button. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. And Bob Thomas
Here.
and John Van Dorn. Absent. So there's 9 present. We have a virtual quorum.
Perfect, thank
Fred
you.
Cox is also present.
Who is also present?
Fred Cox, present.
Thank you, Fred.
Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Keen, I might need to talk to you towards the end of the meeting. I got an email last night that Cheryl Landrum moved. So we can maybe talk about that. So, or we can maybe talk about it in the Executive Director's report, which is next.
Well, thank you. So thank you, Chair, and good morning, committee members and guests. Keen Simons, the LAFCO Executive Officer. Want to just go around the horn for those who are still getting used to LAFCO to identify the staff that are on the call today. Alex, Deputy Commission Counsel. Erica is standing in for Ruth in doing the, and if staff, if you could turn on your cameras, at least for this part. Erica, we have Priscilla, who is doing 2 tasks today, not only going to give you a great presentation on Ramona, is taking over the technical duties for our vacationing due. And then let's see here, we have Adam Wilson, our consultant, who's working on, among other things, our Fallbrook Rainbow project. I think I saw Tammy somewhere. I did see Tammy's name. Maybe she'll put her camera on for a second. And then I want to allow our new graduate intern, Carol Ann, to do a brief introduction. Committee. Many of you are, or at least your staff, are going to get familiar with Carol as she starts helping us out with our service reviews with Linda Heckenkamp, who's now mom, Linda Heckenkamp, who's spending some bonding time with baby boy. So Carol Ann, if you could give us the highlights of who you are and how you came to this great position with LAFCO.
Hi, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, so my name's Carol. It's Carol Ann, but I go by Carol. I recently graduated from Cal State Long Beach with my MPA. I met Keen last year, shortly after the whole COVID, and we've been keeping in touch over the few months, and he presented this opportunity to be an intern with LAFCO after I expressed some interest in joining. And so yeah, he hired me on to help with these MSRs, and so far it's been really exciting. I'm ready to learn more, and it's a pleasure to finally meet you guys. I've been kind of watching the videos and being a silent observer, so it's nice to finally get to interact with you guys. So thanks for having me.
Thank you, Carol. And then
Thank you.
last but not least, I did want to just give up an update on the special district representation on LAFCO. So as you all know, Erin Lump resigned from LAFCO from Rincon del Diablo as she moved out of the area. Tammy held an election, and David Drake, coincidentally enough from Rincon del Diablo, won the spot. And so David has already been at our his first meeting, has done great so far. So you're represented by Joe McKenzie, Barry Willis as your regulars, and then again, David Drake as your alternate. So last but not least, Chair, you made reference to this. You do have an opening on the committee now with Cheryl Landrum from RCD of Greater San Diego, providing her resignation. I believe, Chair, she dated it maybe October 3rd, which corresponds with her leaving the RCD. So by way of policy, the chair has discretion on how to fill that seat. And so, Chair, if you want to, contemplate your options here or offline, it is up to you.
Yeah, I'd probably want to look and see what the extent of her term is, right, for appointment, and then maybe see. I already have people reaching out interested. I've already got emails. I didn't even realize she was leaving, and I have people interested in this spot. So how about I consult with you after the meeting, Keen, about the process, and obviously open it up and look at the balance on the committee across the county, and obviously the special districts as well.
Wonderful.
So do that afterwards. Well, Carol, welcome. We're going to keep you very busy. Known David Drake for a long time. I think he's an excellent addition to LAFCO. And I do want to note for the attendance that I do see Mark Roback has joined us. So we can maybe mark him on. Any questions for the executive director before we move on to the business items from anyone? If you do, raise your hand or wave. Okay. Seeing none, then we'll move on to the business item.
I do have to apologize. When you asked that question, Chair, your vice chair yawned as if there was absolutely nothing he could ask of the LAFCO executive officer staff. I just wanted to note that for the minutes.
Okay, Jack, turn your camera on off for now.
That's why I usually leave my camera off.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to item, I believe it is 4A, the approval of the meeting minutes for March 19th. Those are in your packet for review. I would consider a motion.
I'll motion to approve the minutes, Paul Bushy.
Thank you, Paul.
I'll second with the yawn, Jack.
Thank you, Jack. Any comments, discussion, questions on the minutes? Okay, with that, I'll call for the vote, please. And we do need to do roll call, yes?
Yes.
Okay, roll call vote, please.
Okay. Kimberly Thorner,
Aye.
Jack Beebe,
Yes.
Paul Bushy,
Yes.
Fred Cox,
Yes.
James Gordon,
Aye.
let's see, Albert Al Lau,
Aye.
Marty Miller. Marty on?
I think he's rejoining us right now.
Oh. Okay. I will come back. Mark Roback,
Yes.
Mike Sims,
Yes.
thank you. Oliver Smith,
Aye.
Bob Thomas,
Aye.
and is Marty Miller on the line?
Eric, I believe that Marty Miller's ID Vista is actually Fred Cox. When he spoke, that one.
Is
lit
it?
up.
Okay. Thank you. Everybody.
sorry, Erica. There was someone joining and but
That's
no
okay.
longer joining us.
So I have 10 that voted yes for the minutes. So the motion passes.
Thank you. Okay, with that, we're on to item 4B. Speaking of robust agendas, the adopted work plan for 21 and 22 with no less than 30 calendar projects. Keen?
That's right. Thank you. So, I should have mentioned this earlier, committee members, during the executive officer report. So we are set up today, as we have in the last handful of meetings since COVID, to be able to take public comments. So Chair, at the end of each item, I don't think there was any comments on minutes, but we can check in with Erica if anyone has emails or the like. But 4B is the committee's opportunity to get a check-in on what LAFCO staff is up to. As the chair noted, starting on page 9 of your agenda packet, we've got 30 projects that we have targeted for the year. Okay, so this is in addition to the bread and butter ideas of proposal processing. These are, for the most part, studies, policy updates, or the like, that the commission at some level has tasked staff with addressing in priority order. So essentially the first 10, what we call our top 10, those are the things that we are most interested in putting our resources into. And as we move down that line, all the way towards the very bottom, for example, website enhancements, those are the projects. If we can get to them, great. If not, well, then we will live another day. But what I wanted to do, well, two things. One is just to make sure that the committee, as part of this quarterly check-in, is again familiar with the projects that we're working on. And then I want to focus my comments on two projects that staff certainly believes are pertinent to this committee and the 60 or so independent special districts that you all represent here in San Diego County. The first is this discussed ideal and goal at San Diego LAFCO to better perfect existing statute that deals with how cities and special districts provide or can provide new or extended services outside their jurisdictional boundaries, out of agency services. Maybe about a year ago, we came to you with this item, mostly for discussion, but also to ask for your input in how we could go forward with a legislative remedy. You will recall that as we see it, as San Diego LAFCO sees it, the problem is the statute identifies a handful of exceptions that say, hey, you don't need to get formal LAFCO approval to enter into a contract to provide services, whatever those services may be, outside your boundary. And they're limited, but a key one would be when two or more agencies get together and decide they want to contract or receive, let's say, water or wastewater from another entity to accommodate some kind of development. The problem as we see it, and we have seen it in real time, is there are instances where cities and special districts are self-exempting themselves without a check-in with LAFCO. And as the case has occurred with our resource conservation districts and some healthcare districts, this has caused problems not only for LAFCO, but for the other agencies in San Diego County. And so what we have proposed, and you can see it as attachment 2 or 1 to this agenda item, is to make a very simple clarification that the exemptions that are listed in this code section shall be determined by LAFCO. And based on this committee's input, they can be determined also by the executive officer. And as I think many of you who were at that December 2020 committee meeting will recall, the desire was, hey, we get that LAFCO should be consulted. We just don't want to get caught up in a long process to get clarification. So that's why that wording, an insert of executive officers there, because administratively, I or my brethren across the state could make that call relatively quickly if, yes, we agree with you. You don't need a formal approval. So that's where we left it off in December of 2020. We did some initial groundwork in talking to other LAFCOs. We talked a little bit with California Special Districts Association. And of course, like everyone else, things got hectic in year 2 of COVID, or I guess year 1 at the end. And so we punted. We've now come back to the topic, thankfully now with the assistance of not only our consultant, Adam Wilson, to help us locally, but also with Pamela Miller from Cal LAFCO. And our goal is to partner up with Cal LAFCO and with the help of Adam here locally, and get a sponsor or an author and move this forward to making it happen in the 22 legislative session. What I want to make sure that I communicate with this committee is that you are A, aware of this, and B, that if you don't love it, at least you're okay with it. I'd love for you to love it, but I'm most interested in making sure that you understand the rationale and that you are good with the thinking behind it. So there's one other topic that we have in this agenda report item, and that's about updating Rule 4. I think we've talked about Rule 4 quite a bit, at least in the past. It's something, again, we hit pause on last year and we're going to come back to this year, and that deals with this idea of, our policies, as Paul Bushy and others directly encountered, when it comes to categorizing special district functions and classes is a bit outdated, and we need some modernizing of our policies to better help special districts, to better help the commission. All I want to make sure that the committee is aware of is that we're still thinking about it and we're going to work on it. But perhaps, Chair, if you're okay with it, I know that Pamela's going to speak on this on the next item, but perhaps I could ask Pamela to just kind of interject from Cal LAFCO's perspective, how they view this challenge of 56133 outside of San Diego. And then perhaps we could check in with Adam on, some initial ground efforts here to find an author and everything. So this is just for discussion, but we want to make sure that that the committee is aware of these two projects, and in particular now the idea of amending Government Code 56133.
Thank you. Pamela, did you want to share Cal LAFCO's perspective on this?
Yes, thank you very much. Good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, members of the committee. I am Pamela Miller, the Executive Director with Cal LAFCO, and I really appreciate the opportunity to spend a few minutes with you this morning. As this issue is not exclusive or limited to San Diego LAFCO, and I think it's really important that your committee understand that this is actually a statewide issue. And Keen, thank you for mentioning the recent spotlight that you all did in the RCD MSR that you did, that was very clearly spotlighted the issue, at least locally there. But I've heard from a host of other LAFCOs, from Mendocino, who's dealing with this issue right now with respect to water, to Butte, to Fresno, Alameda, and a whole host of others who have had or are currently dealing with this issue, where these service providers are self-exempting. And as Keen indicated, it is a problem not only for the LAFCO, but also for the service provider themselves. Boundaries mean something. Quality of service means something. And so regardless of whether the LAFCO would have provided the exemption or not, We really strongly believe that it's imperative that LAFCO retain the authority that has been given to them statutorily. We see this as actually a loophole, an unintended loophole in the statute. And so we are really pleased to come back. This has been a priority for the board, but we have limited resources. So they have made it their top priority this year. So we're very pleased to be working with San Diego LAFCO and co-sponsoring this. We have been discussing some ideas about had conversations with Keen and with Adam, who might be a good, strong author or authors, co-authors for this kind of legislation. So we have made this our top legislative priority for 2022.
Thank you. Does anyone have any comments or questions on this legislative proposal?
Kim, if I have just a quick question for the executive officer, if that's possible. So I guess I think I agree that I think it's important to have someone sort of overseeing services so things don't get out of hand. So I think in concept, this makes sense to me. My only worry is that we make it too complicated so it dissuades those services. So that's sort of my hope. You know, I'll give you an example. We provide some Vector truck support services to Valley Center. We've got a Vector truck. They don't have one. You know, it makes sense for us to say, all right, let's leverage this equipment, and twice a month we do some services for them. If there was a complicated process or a fee associated with LAFCO doing it, then we might just throw our hands up and say it's not worth the effort. So I'm sort of hoping for little efforts like that. It can be very informal. It doesn't need to be a real drawn out, complicated process. If it was a bigger service, like we were going to say, oh, we're going to do sewer for, this agency or a new development, I could see that being bigger. But just these small shared services that all of us do as districts, some way to make sure that's not, overly cumbersome and sort of prevent us from being more effective as agencies.
No, I agree, Jack. And, I think this county is well situated to address that because we have this committee and we can vet and create policies to make the process that much smoother and transparent. I think that's a challenge for other counties that I know Pamela and others will have to deal with, but I hear you. So agreed on that point.
I think, Paul, you have your hand up, and then Pamela as well. Paul?
Thanks, Kim. Yeah, kind of along what Jack said, I had a thought on that, and just, I just don't want it to be interpreted to, as Jack said, dissuade, small, mutual aid type things. Like, for example, Kim's organization and ours recently, they're going to have their crew come over and open valves for us because they have that specialized equipment to do it. And we're going to go use our Vector trucks because the Liebenheim doesn't have those on hand about twice a year to go clean out a couple of wet wells at their pump stations, things like that. To me, that doesn't seem like that's a LAFCO issue. I hope it doesn't. I hope that's not your interpretation, Keen or Pamela. But yeah, if it were, I wouldn't want to go through a lot of effort because that would there's no money exchange. It's just an agreement of service. Both of us could either contract that out to somebody else. We decided to do it mutually. So that along Jack's lines, I have those same thoughts. I did have a question under the exemptions, and it's really more of a clarification. It's I don't know if it's on page 1 or 15 of the attachment, but right under where Keen, you added read the executive officer, that E1 is this 2 more public agencies where public services to be provided as an alternate or substitute, and it goes on. Can you give me an example of that? I've read that 3 times and I'm not exactly sure what that means. And I was wondering if there's a way we can make that less ambiguous.
Well, wonderful comment, Paul. And I would encourage everyone to look at their packet, and it's page 15, subsection E1. And as Paul pointed out, this long sentence that contemplates an exemption between two or more public agencies under certain criterion. The fact that, Paul, someone as astute as you says, hey, this is kind of an odd sentence, highlights the need for there to be someone like LAFCO to weigh in on this. And I would offer up, and Pamela may have some good outside perspective beyond San Diego, but when I read this, I view it as this is really a apple-to-apple trade where something's already being provided in the immediate area, and for whatever infrastructure or resource, it's better that another entity go ahead and provide it. But it can be interpreted a lot of different ways, and I think that's one of the reasons why LAFCO should come in and have that uniform voice.
Okay, thank you, Keen. I have Pamela, and then Oliver, and then Mike Sims. Pamela?
Thank you. So 2 comments. First, to the first comment about making sure this doesn't get complicated and convoluted. We would, from a Cal LAFCO standpoint, be encouraging all of our LAFCOs to create local policies. It could be something as simple as the service provider sending a 1-paragraph letter to the LAFCO, giving them a heads up that this is happening, that would then LAFCO would review it and then say, yeah, this qualifies for an exemption, or we probably should take a closer look at this. So we'll be encouraging policies to keep this as simple and streamlined as possible. And then with respect to the comment on the observation about E1, the concern that a lot of our members have is in the phrase where the level of service to be provided is consistent with the level of service contemplated by the existing service provider. It's really LAFCO who has the authority to determine, is the level of service commensurate or equal to the existing? We have had situations where one service provider believes they're providing the same or better level of service. And in fact, that is actually not the case. So that is really a part of LAFCO's authority by statute. And so that is really one reason why we feel very strongly that it is LAFCO who needs to make this determination.
Thank you. Oliver, did you have a comment, question?
I just had a comment that perhaps the governing code amendment needs to incorporate some criteria that says below this level of size of the project or whatever you're trying to do, LAFCO is not involved. And I think the examples of the use of a Vector truck for a couple of days a month as negotiated between a couple of districts would be one of the levels that might be considered. I don't know how you'd word it, but then LAFCO doesn't get involved in the small stuff. And, you know, if it reaches whatever the level of criteria is for LAFCO to be involved, then LAFCO should be involved. But if there's a clear delineation between where LAFCO should be involved and LAFCO does not need to be involved, I would say that would be something that should be seriously considered. That's my comment.
Thank you for that. Mike, did you have a comment or question?
Yeah, thank you, Kim. Whenever I hear the term or phrase boundaries matter, while I agree with that for most special districts that LAFCO deals with that have hard infrastructure and things in the ground that don't move, it's a very different dynamic in the fire service where we very intentionally don't have boundaries. We have a term called boundary drop because we try to operate as one big seamless fire department across the county, even though we're all separate entities. So I just wanted to share that with the group and make sure that we understand the distinction when we're talking about fire service versus all the other district services. End of comment.
Fires know no boundaries.
True. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment. Does anyone else have any comments or questions on this? I guess I would conclude by adding mine. I do like the addition of the executive officer for the exemptions. As I sat here, and I hadn't even contemplated the Vector truck being an exception here. I sat and looked at, I buy recycled water from 4 different public agencies. I have interties and interconnections at my agency. And so I think once this passes, I think that the grandfather list that's going to have to go through the executive director here to take a look at, all of the existing services. If one individual agency, if I can think of 10 off the top, it's going to be a burdensome process for the local LAFCOs to go through. And so I do agree with both Paul and Jack to make it not burdensome, right? Because all of these agreements, all of these are intended to provide enhanced services. And so to make that burdensome on the public agencies, I definitely agree that having the executive officer have the ability to review these exceptions, especially ones that have been in place for decades, would be very beneficial. Keen, are you looking for anything from this committee? I'm assuming at a later date, if this actually gets picked up, introduced, and modified, you're going to have a work pill here in San Diego County, and maybe this committee could help with the process at that point. Are you looking for anything else besides that?
Thank you, Chair. So the immediate goal here is just to keep you abreast of this project. Bluntly, I would like the committee, if they felt comfortable enough, to provide a letter of support when the time comes. Because I think this group is organized and thinks things out. And if you can see the merit in having LAFCO provide a kind of a uniform but rational injection into the exemption process, I think it will do well and speak well of the effort to authors out there. And I saw Adam's hand up there, and if Chair, maybe we could check in with Adam too.
Adam?
Thank you, Kimberly. Thank you, Keen. Yeah, I just want to make one comment as well from my observation, and hopefully it'll provide a little more clarification with what is being discussed at this point in time as well. But I also want to point out that subsection E1, the first couple words say 2 or more agencies. And so the examples of which you've described with the Vector trucks and giving the authority to the executive officer, in my perspective, that scenario would be quite simple. It would be 2 agencies coming to the executive officer and saying, hey, we're in agreement to provide this service, mutually. There's no issue. Executive officer signs it off. The challenges that we are facing, and the majority of the examples where we truly have run into these issues, is when it's more than 2 agencies. And so when there's 2 entities or 2 jurisdictions in agreement over a service that may be spilling over into that 3rd boundary, that is when we've faced the real issues. And so there might be some distinction with that. And then hopefully that clarifies or gives at least some level of ease to the examples that you've provided. And so I just wanted to make that clarification. And then I'll just also add to, Pamela and I and Keen have had some internal conversations, and I have been tasked with the legislative approach on this. And so it's helpful to hear this feedback. The current legislative session in Sacramento just adjourned last Friday. So a lot of the legislators are digging out of that. It will be in the next coming weeks and the next couple of months to kind of do the groundwork and pitch these bills and provide that information to them. But this is all helpful as we move forward. So we're kind of right back at the infancy of kind of get this started. So as we work with those elected offices in Sacramento, this is all good feedback, because I know these questions and concerns will pop up, but I appreciate the dialogue in today. So thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Paul and Jack, both your hands went up. Paul, I think you went first.
let me take my hand down here for a second. So, no, Adam, thank you. And I guess from my perspective, when I read that, my thought was and Keen kind of answered the question. It's somewhat subjective, and kind of my thought was like, where do you draw the line? Kind of along Oliver's, context, and if it's just an email from Kim and me to Keen or something like that to say, hey, we're doing this, we think it's exempt, and do you agree or something? But the subjectivity of that concerns me, in that if we didn't have a reasonable person like Keen in the seat, and he decided that required a 1-year LAFCO review, which I know Keen would never do because he's very reasonable. But that's where I'd be like, all right, this is getting ridiculous. It's getting impossible to do really good things. And so that's really, Adam, the context of where I was coming from. Is there a way we can define exemptions? And if it's a simple process, as Pamela alluded to, I'm good with that. But I just didn't know if there was a way to tighten that up a little bit. But
I appreciate that, Paul. And I wasn't trying to make the comment or assumption that there should not be some sort of criteria. I certainly understand that, but I just wanted to make the distinction too, that the scenarios when it's just 2 agencies is a little different when there's maybe 3 or 4 agencies that are involved as well. And so it could be something as simple as, hey, these two jurisdictions agree, we're providing the same level of service. Here's the email, and Keen signs off. But I just wanted to say there is a complicated layer as well.
I agree that, yeah, there are times where, in the conservation district issue really highlights it. Yeah, I'm not saying LAFCO shouldn't have any purview over anything like that. I'm just saying for very minor mutual aid type stuff, does this really throw us into this process that could be time consuming? And that's kind of where I'd like to see if there was some limits or an easy process where it's like, yeah, just go for it, guys, something like that.
I note that the beginning of the government code section, where it's the process for actually applying for extended services, has timelines in it. It says within 30 days after receipt, the executive officer will determine, but yet the exemption process has no timelines. So maybe adding some of that language down below to give some comfort that this won't be that year process. Because to me, it looks like, whoa, within 30 days, if you look up at item D, the executive officer makes a determination. Maybe there's some clarifying language that we add down below for that process as well. That might give some comfort to the agencies of what to expect. Because as of right now, I don't believe it has anything. All right, with that, Jack, your hand is up. I'm sorry.
Yes, thank you, Kim. Yeah, real quick. I was just thinking, I don't want to volunteer myself for this, but maybe Paul, he seems like he's got it fleshed out. So if Keen's looking for a letter of support, maybe we identify some of these items in it that, we support it, but we think essentially we could develop a policy within San Diego LAFCO in terms of how we anticipate this would get applied working with Keen. Projects that are just 2 agencies providing mutual service would just provide notification to the executive officer, something like that just sort of dealt with these issues. So we had something, documented, not so much worried about getting it all in the government code, but just have it as a procedure put together for, San Diego LAFCO that could maybe serve as a model. And in the letter of support, we could just identify, some of those things that we think are important. So this isn't overly burdensome, and get that down in writing.
Kim, this is Fred from Rancho Santa Fe.
Hi, Fred.
Hey, how are you? Yeah,
Good.
the only concern I would have is I know our fire district has entered into agreements with Solana Beach, Del Mar, and Encinitas for shared chief services. And I think, the process could be overly cumbersome if we have to go through LAFCO every time we want to do some type of shared program or shared service. And I do think we need to have some parameters that identify, for the big ones, I don't have any problem going through LAFCO, but for those things that we do all the time and, we do it regularly, I think we need to look at that a little closer because it's going to affect the delivery of fire services, especially in times of budgetary constraints when we're looking at ways of saving money. And I just don't want to have to go through those extra steps to get things implemented. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. So I think I heard Jack volunteer to draft a letter, right? But I'm also
I
hearing,
volunteered Paul.
but I'm also hearing two different. I think I'm hearing two different things. I don't think anyone is saying that they don't think that LAFCO should be involved. What they're concerned about is the ultimate process of how it gets translated to the day-to-day with each of us, right? And all of us are trying to be efficient, do our jobs and streamlined, and the concern that there'll be another layer that might disrail that. And so it almost seems like, yes, we support it. And hey, when we develop the implementation of it here in San Diego County, these are the things that we'd like you to take into account. Is that an accurate statement of what folks are saying? Yes.
That's
Okay.
how I heard it.
Okay. All right. Okay. So could I then recommend that Jack and Paul, you guys take the lead on that together?
I'll draft it, Jack. How's that sound? So you sign me up, and then I'll run it by Jack, you, Kim, and then we can run it by the committee to see
Yep.
if that's suitable. And again, have no problem writing it in support of, especially as you pointed out, Kim, the context that the executive officer should have, the ability to determine exemptions on certain levels. So I'll see what I can come up with, and Jack and I can beat it up, and we'll run it by the entire committee. And Keen, do you have a timeline on that? Is there some timeline that you need for us to pull this together?
Well, I know Adam and Pamela are going to start, getting further into the outreach mode into Sacramento. So would it be unreasonable to ask by the end of the month?
Yeah, the only thing is I'd like to run it through the entire advisory committee, just to make sure we're all on the same page.
We could do that via email.
Okay.
Well, very good. And I wanted to just make comment on a couple of other items on the work plan, Chair, before we move from this item. And that is just so that the committee is aware, we did recently adopt a translation policy at San Diego LAFCO. I would encourage all of you, when you get a chance, to take a look at that. And then in turn, we're tasked with also establishing a policy on environmental justice. I know the county just has established a environmental justice element that I have yet to look at, but I'm going to look at it during the draft review period. Offline, I'd certainly be interested in hearing any input from you or your staff on thoughts about how LAFCO can appropriately address our regulatory and planning functions in making boundaries notional and mean something, but also do a little bit of social justice and contemplating environmental justice issues as well. And then last but not least, on project number 26, which it's identified as a low project, but it's actually rather pertinent. And I'm hoping that DO will be able to get to this. This involves all of you, and that is, we'd like to work with you or your GIS coordinators in creating a utility layer on our website. Maybe not, of all of your trade secrets, but something that allows us internally to better connect the dots and understanding, when we get projects, how would, Olivehane or Fallbrook be able to serve them? How far away are they from your core infrastructure? So please keep an eye out on that. So Chair, that was our update on the work plan, and I very much appreciate the thoughtful comments on 56133.
Great. Thank you. Thank you all for the comments. All right. So with that, we are on to the legislative report from Cal LAFCO.
Okay,
And
this is Oliver.
hi,
Just to cut in the package, there was Article 4 rules.
rule number 4. Yes.
Right. Section 4.4 under function. They list sewer instead of wastewater. Is that
Well, so
is just
that
picky on my part?
Well, yes and no. It's picking up all of ours. We actually ran into issues with Rule 4, number 4 on an issue. It feels like it was a couple years ago. And one of the thoughts was the need to address and look at this as utilities and what they provide has evolved. And so I believe that is also on the work plan to take a look at Rule 4.4. And so I think it was a reminder to us. We kind of dropped off on it, but I did notice looking at it relative to the Ramona MSR, it was noted that the updated 4.4. So this is also a work project for LAFCO this year as well. And so
it was just the terminology of sewer versus wastewater. I do not hear the term sewer very often.
Oliver, I'm very familiar with 4.4, thanks to Mr. Simons.
We're going to update it. We're still going to enforce it, but we'll update it and make sure that it's more modernized. Groundwater management's not there. Broadband services isn't there. Solar energy. I can't wait to get involved in the CCEs, the community choice aggregates. They don't know. They're not even ready for our comments. So. No, Oliver, this is an area that warrants, and it's something Mike Ott noted on his way out. It's a policy that just needs some upkeeping.
Yes. All right. We will warn the CCAs that Keene is coming.
So
Okay.
as you mentioned, Chair, Pamela Miller is the Executive Director at Cal LAFCO. So Pamela, on her vacation, has agreed to give us a bit of an update on what's been going on relative to LAFCO of recent, and what are some things on our mind in addition to 56133 going forward?
Thank you, Keene. Thank you, Madam Chair. So Keene, just as an FYI, San Francisco LAFCO will be your expert on the energy stuff. That's why that LAFCO was originally formed. So great resource there for you. So you have a couple of really big items after me, so I'm going to keep this very short. I was asked to share what has Cal LAFCO been working on this past year and what's on the plate for next year in addition to 56133. Every year I say, wow, this was such an unusual year, and I'm surprised by it, and I don't know why I'm surprised by it anymore, but they just keep getting weirder. I think one of the most important observations and takeaways from a Cal LAFCO perspective that I have from this year is that Cal LAFCO's perspective and input is being increasingly sought by capital insiders this year more than ever before. And we have a seat at the table now rather than being on the menu. We're planning the menu, not on the menu, which is always the best place to be, right? So we have shifted the way we operate to a more proactive than a reactive mode in terms of legislation that affects LAFCOs. Oftentimes those bills, maybe one-off bills dealing with a local issue, or others who are sponsoring legislation that want to make a minor change and have no idea what the statewide unintended consequences are. So this year in particular, we had 4 subcommittees, which is an unprecedented number, and tracked and were involved in more bills than ever before. That seems to be the trend. We were tapped by the Speaker's office and Assemblymember Garcia's office to work very closely with them on AB 1195, which is a local issue in LA on drinking water. We successfully crafted a very special pilot program for LA LAFCO with a special authority and guardrails with respect to that authority and a sunset. That bill was held over as a 2-year bill. Another example of one of these one-off bills that was intended to deal with a particular district issue up north in El Dorado County actually we have statewide issues. It's SB 96. So we are working very closely with Senator Dolly and the staff of Senate Gov and Finance Committee to transition and amend the bill so that it doesn't just fix one district's issue, because we have a host of districts, these small mountain districts, that have this issue. So how can we amend the statute so that it fixes the statewide problem, not just one district's problem? And then CalAFCO was a very had a very strong voice with several other stakeholders in successfully securing amendments on Senator Gonzalez's SB 403, which is another drinking water bill. So lots of critical work. And the unusual part, one of the reasons that we're talking about sponsored legislation so early this year, we were discussing this well before the close of this legislative year for next year, is that, as you're probably already aware, all of the legislators were limited to the number of bills that they could move to the second house. So they were allowed to introduce the same number of bills that they're always allowed to introduce. But given the condensed hearings due to COVID, they were only allowed to move forward 12 bills to the other house, which means we have a very large number of 2-year hangover bills, way more than is normal. And so we are competing for an author with a lot of 2-year bills that they're holding on to. So securing an author earlier than normal is critical going into 2022. Really quickly, one other really critical piece of work that CalAFCO has been doing for a couple of years now, and we are so close to the finish line, relates to problems with the protest provisions in statute. The Little Hoover Commission, as most all of you are probably very painfully aware, like LAFCOs are, the Little Hoover Commission did a year-long study that culminated in a report in 2017 that had a number of recommendations related to LAFCOs. And one of them, several of them we've already taken statutory action on. One of them was that the legislature convene an advisory committee and review the protest process and develop legislation to simplify not only the process, but to create consistency in the disparate threshold percentages that trigger elections. Because when a LAFCO initiates an action, it's 10%, and when it's a non-LAFCO initiated action, it's 25%. So early in 2019, CalAFCO took the lead and formed a working group that consisted of 19 folk. It had representatives from CalAFCO, from CSDA. We had a League of California Cities, and a CSAC. The counties had a representative, and a representative each from the Assembly Local Government Committee and the Senate Gov and Finance Committee. We ended up having 3 main outcomes, one of which was to delete obsolete provisions in the statute, which was successfully completed this year. That was passed in our omnibus bill. The second was to develop language to simplify it. So we took all of their various locations that protest is in statute and consolidated existing language into one area, which flowed smoothly, makes a lot of sense. It's easy for LAFCOs to understand. It's easier for the public to understand. We recently received consensus from the entire working group on that, so we are ready to move that forward legislatively in 22. And then the final piece of work that working group undertook was reviewing and doing something about those disparate percentage thresholds. So we are hoping that we can wrap that work up as well and move both of those 2 outstanding and final pieces forward legislatively next year with the consensus of that working group. So that would be a culmination of 3 long years of work with that collaborative work with that, a broad working group, and allow all of us to check another box in terms of how we are responding to those recommendations by the Little Hoover Commission. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, and thank you.
Do we have any questions for Pamela? No. Thank you for joining us, especially on your vacation. And I am pleased to hear that the role is now being input sought. I've always believed if you walk in and you said if you're not planning the menu, you're on the menu. I 100% agree with that. And it's always better to be there guiding the policy before it actually gets implemented. So thank you for the work that you do on behalf of all of us. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Pamela. And just to double down, the protest proceeding works that Pamela and our working group have done already is impressive. And going forward, it's critical issues for all of us in here in San Diego. So I would encourage the committee to keep in tune with this effort going forward.
Thank you, Keen. Before we move on to item 4D, I probably should have paused after the last item. So I need to ask if we have any public comments on item 4B or 4C before we move on to 4D.
Thank you, Chair. I did not receive any pre-registered speakers, and so far I've not received any public comments.
Thank you, Erica. Okay, with that, we are good to move on to item 4D, which is the draft municipal service review on the Ramona region. And Priscilla, I believe you're going to brief this one for us.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm going to be speaking about the municipal service review on the Ramona region, and I'm going to pull up a PowerPoint for you all just quickly here. One moment. There we go. Can you all see that?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So yes, good morning, Chair and members. Thank you. I'm pleased to be joining you as your host, but also to be providing you a brief summary. For those who do not know me, my name is Priscilla Allen, and I'm analyst with San Diego LAFCO. So to begin, this is the municipal service review we recently prepared on the Ramona region, and it largely focuses on the Ramona Municipal Water District. As you all know, as part of our associated tasks here at LAFCO, we prepare these studies to do independent check-ins on the level, range, adequacy of service functions and of local government with 3 outcomes in mind. So 1, to provide an informational resource to the general public. 2, to inform the sphere updates that we do every 5 years for cities and special districts. And then 3, to sometimes produce, whether directly or indirectly, boundary changes and or other local governmental changes, such as creating or consolidating special districts. And so on the next few slides here, I'll be going over our summary of the Ramona Municipal Service Review. So on this map, you'll see the designated study area, and that is an area that matches with the Ramona Community Plan area. It spans about 130 square miles. And you'll see there the Ramona Municipal Water District is within its center core, and that spans about 75 square miles. Ramona has grown to a community of 38,000 residents, and about 94% of those residents reside within its center core and within the Ramona Municipal Water District. The district was formed back in 1956, and they currently hold 5 active service functions: water, wastewater, fire, parks and recreation, and lastly, recycled water. And so with our municipal service review, as you know, we break it up into some key themes, recommendations, and conclusions. And so for our key themes, they total 8 as summarized on the screen. And then I'll be just highlighting 4. So 1, Ramona has an evolving community character, and they're gradually moving toward a more suburban setting. Number 2, Ramona Municipal Water District has an expanded and centralized role as they've continued to grow as the local governmental unit within the area. And they showed to have adequate service capacities, with one notable exception being wastewater flows during water periods. And lastly, the municipal water district has a solid financial standing with no noted exceptions. And so these were really the key takeaways of the service review. And then next we have our recommendations, which directly tie into these themes. They total 14, and they're on the next 3 slides, but I'll be focusing in on the last slide here, and I'll highlight 3. So number 9 on your screen, the Ramona Municipal Water District and San Diego County Fire Protection District should consider a voluntary consolidation under the Fire Protection District's greater economies of scale. Number 12 on your screen, Ramona Municipal Water District has reached its natural limit under their Principal Act, and it would make sense for them to work with LAFCO in assessing the merits to reorganize into Community Services District. And then relatedly, and number 11 on your screen, the commission should prepare a future informational report to advise on incorporation opportunities in San Diego County, to also include the Ramona region. And so we presented this draft summary to our commission on August 2nd, to which then we initiated a 45-day public review period and comment period. That period ends on September 27th. We have not received formal comment. However, I did just present to the Ramona Municipal Water District Board this week, to where we received verbal comments, and I do anticipate receiving that soon from their general manager, Craig. And so with that, I will end my presentation. And if you have any questions, I am here.
Thank you, Priscilla.
Thank you.
So I'm going to wait till we switch back to the, okay, so I can see the actual hands. I have Mr. Beebe and Mr. Bushy. We'll go first, Jack.
Yeah, sorry, I guess Paul and I used up all our questions. I was just going to say, I think I went through the MSR in some detail, and I just wanted to say, I think it's really well done by LAFCO. And I think it also does a great job of capturing some of the challenges you have as a water district in unincorporated areas, and some of those challenges in those areas of the county, and what may need to happen in the future. So I just wanted to say, I think it was really well done, and picked up some of those unique characteristics of water districts in unincorporated areas of the county.
Thank you.
And Paul.
No, I just great picture of Potato Chip Rock, guys. That's awesome. So I did, as Jack said, I think it's very well done. I just had a couple questions on the recommendations, and when I read them, I guess coming from my frame of reference is a very heavily regulated industry. There's a couple of recommendations that I thought, I guess my question would be, is this really a LAFCO purview item? For example, recommendation 3, inflow and infiltration on their wastewater system. That really, to me, is something that should fall under the regional board and their draft waste discharge requirements. That would be required as part of that. Things like public outreach. I just got a sense here that this started to take on more than a review. It took on more like an operational efficiency audit. And I'm just laying out the question here. Is that really the intent? Do we really need to get into to Ramona's public outreach program and tell them they have to use social media? Or is that an internal choice that they should have as an organization? So, but overall, it was very well done. But I just feel like in a couple of places, at least from my perspective, it starts to really creep into the day-to-day options of the organization, as opposed to sticking to more of the global. Is this the best service? Are their finances strong? Are they able to do that? So I don't know if anybody wants to comment on that, but that would be my comment on that, on the MSR.
Thank you, Jack. I'm Paul. I'm sorry, I'm looking at Jack. looking at Jack and then, all right, you guys are right next to each other on my screen. Does anyone have any comments or on Paul's remarks?
Actually, so I'll jump in. And so they're certainly valid, Paul, right? You know, how does LAFCO choose to frame the discussion in our review? And for the most part, I would suggest that we keep to broad strokes. For example, using the example, when we look at water, we're not looking at pressure zones. We're just looking at the aggregate system. You know, we don't go into what I would consider more of the micro analysis, at least unless there was something really of a red flag. But I will say this, the legislature has made it specific that LAFCO look at infrastructure issues or governance and accountability. And so the nexus is not necessarily in this situation whether LAFCO should be tackling outreach or infrastructure issues. The legislature's already answered that question. We will. I think a fair comment would be, to what level do we weigh in on it in terms of the scale? I would offer up that for us to look at a district like Ramona and looking at its wastewater capabilities, it's certainly pertinent to us because we know there's a development project on the horizon in Ramona that's going to want to connect to the Santa Maria wastewater system. And so for us to be able to document in this MSR, hey, looks like you have some trouble during high flow periods. It then tells the developer who will walk into LAFCO's offices 6 months and say, hey, we're going to request annexation. We'll say, well, we've kind of telegraphed that this is already something on our mind. What say you? What is the district doing about it? So it's a fair comment, but there is rationale behind it.
Just the one thing I'd mention is I think their conclusions are just generally suggestions for consideration by their board. So I think if the tone of it was you must do social media, that would be something else. But I think if they're going through the review and said, hey, it's something that we're seeing with other districts now to effectively communicate, it's something to consider. It's just a recommendation that, this is something we see, you might consider it. If they were instead saying you must, then it would be different. The Ramona governing board can still say, yeah, we hear what you're saying, but we don't want to do social media, for whatever reason. So that, at least I sort of took them as,
and well said. We will transition to shall when we get to Leucadia. So.
Fair enough.
Chair, I just want to check in with Alex to see if he had any inputs on, just the MSR process in Ramona. I saw you turned on the camera.
No inputs, Keen. I'm just following along.
Very good.
So maybe dating myself, but I've been involved in the last two MSRs with Ramona, and the last one actually was a very deep dive. And I'm actually pleased in reading this one that a lot of the issues that were pointed out in the last MSR are no longer issues that rose to the top here. So that was actually nice to see. I think governance and recycled water were prominent in the last one. My question, has Ramona responded to are they supportive of the suggestion that they evolve into a CSD? Are we aware of that, or are we waiting for their comments?
So I attended their last board meeting this week, and they did have comments. They have a few concerns with the CSD recommendation, with regard to how do they finance that. But they are also supportive in the transition. So I know one comment that was made was, we would like to see our tax dollars stay here. And this is one way of moving towards us really, taking those steps. And so I think they're supportive of that. They, and I forgot in my presentation to kind of add to and address the comments that were made. There were a few other items that they'll be commenting on wastewater flows and on water rates, some of the recommendations, and kind of providing us with some context. And so that was a part of the conversation as well. And once we receive that, we'll be able to incorporated into the final report.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Okay, excellent job. Appreciate the presentation on that. I'm going to go actually to Erica and ask if we do have any public comments received on this item.
So far, none received.
Thank you very much. Okay, with that, we are on to our final business item. We saved the best for last. And then that is the reorganization proposals by Fallbrook and Rainbow to detach from the San Diego County Water Authority and annex into Eastern.
I'm going to ask Adam to handle this item.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, Keen. Thank you, Madam Chair. So just I'll give you a quick brief update on the proposals of Rainbow and Fallbrook and CWA. The ad hoc committee has been meeting roughly monthly. Those deliberations and discussions have been progressing nicely. Dr. Hanneman continues to further his analysis on the 3 topics that he's been tasked to study, which are water reliability, the water rate impacts and any costs or impacts associated with that, and any potential departure or exit fee. At our last meeting in July, there were a few members or a handful of members of the ad hoc committee that expressed an interest to see an advanced copy of the draft study from Dr. Hanneman. And so we've kind of re-engineered our schedule a little bit with respect to that. So based on the direction at our last meeting, Dr. Hanneman should be approaching the runway to land this draft study for everybody on the ad hoc committee's review. That is due to be provided on Monday, September 20th. I'm still going to check in with Dr. Hanneman this afternoon to make sure we're on scheduled for that. But at this point in time, he is tasked to provide that by Monday. That will give the ad hoc committee members the needed time to digest that study, go over it and review it. And we have pushed the next ad hoc committee meeting to the afternoon of October 4th. So that will give roughly 2 weeks of time for the ad hoc committee members to look over that. And so when we meet again, we can have a more constructive, more in-depth, more direct dialogue and conversation and deliberation regarding the draft study, and let Dr. Hanneman proceed accordingly from there on then. Looking a little more further from that, after the October 4th meeting, I would suppose Dr. Hanneman would go back and continue to work on his analysis and materialize that draft report into a final report. We'll eventually get that out to a public review for 45 days. And then at this point in time, we are still scheduled to have the ad hoc committee provide a final recommendation to the commission no later by the end of the year. So that's it in a nutshell. If there's any questions or concerns, I'm more than happy to field them.
Thank you, Adam. Do we have any questions, concerns, or comments? Well, that was relatively easy. Adam, I am on that subcommittee, and I do appreciate your efforts as a moderator for keeping us on track and guiding us through the process. You've been doing an excellent job. I also want to say in the packet, I very much appreciated the way the Q&A, it read very well, and it was concise. And so I did appreciate that in the packet as well.
Thank you. I appreciate your feedback. And I think you'll get, I think from what I've seen and what has been shared to me limited, I think Dr. Hanneman really appreciated those comments as well in terms of the QSA format or Q&A format. And I think you will find a little of that in his upcoming report.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on this? Okay, thank you. Erica, can I check back in with you to see if we have any public comments on item 4E?
So far, no public comments.
All right. And then item 5 is public comments, and I don't believe we've received any in advance. You've already stated that.
Yes, no comments received.
Hey,
Hi.
Kim, one note on it, just since we're talking about it, some of the data on that PowerPoint was out of date, so I know he is updating it. So certain things like use of water authority facilities was pretty out of date data, so I know that that's being updated in the revised one, so that the packet was sort of that early draft, but there'll be updated data in the next version.
Okay, thank you. All right, committee member announcements. This is the opportunity to go if anyone has an announcement that they would like to make relative to their agency or pertinent to LAFCO. Does anyone?
Kim, this is Bob Thomas. I'd kind of like to update the committee on a major capital improvement project that we're doing at Pomerado Cemetery.
Fantastic.
Just for those who don't know, Pomerado Cemetery is a 30-acre public cemetery that serves Poway, Scripps Ranch, Rancho Bernardo, that surrounding area. I've been on the board for 18 years. This is the first major CIP project we have. We currently are upgrading our entryway with new gates, associated landscaping. We were undertaking a well investigation, given our state right now with water, and our feasibility for one or more wells on our property. That first phase, which is ongoing, is about $3 million. The future phases will entail relocating the admin building, adding gazebo and public areas and meeting areas for the public and people who come to our cemetery, and just a general landscaping overhaul. So we're quite excited about this. As I mentioned, it's our first major capital improvement project, and we're looking forward to its completion eventually. So that's all I have.
Thank you for sharing, and congratulations on that major CIP. Does anyone else have any comments for the group? Reports out from committee members? No, seeing none. Okay, then I will say we do have the vacancy by Cheryl Landrum that'll be happening in October. I will work on figuring out how we'll do that appointment. I do have interest. If any of you know of other folks in special districts that are interested, please have them reach out. Then I believe at the beginning of the meeting, we discussed having the December meeting as a hybrid. And I believe Mr. Bushy volunteered his beautiful facilities as the location for those that chose in person, and he promised VG Donuts as at the December board meeting. So I did insert that VG's. We will proceed.
Acadia Donuts, because we got to stay in the service area, and personally, I think they're better than VG's. I'm sorry.
Okay, Jack, you and I keep calling you Jack. Paul, you and I will have that debate. I'm going to keep calling you Jack if you insist on the Acadia. We'll have that debate later on. So we will plan on proceeding with doing a hybrid unless things obviously change. And as we know, with the COVID, things do change quite regularly. And I see Mike Sims giving the thumbs up. So thank you for that. With that, Priscilla, I want to thank you for hosting us excellently today. You gave Dew a run for his money. So
thank you, Chair.
And with that, I will call the meeting adjourned and see all of you in December. Thank you for the time today.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, everyone.